Nelson Mandela's granddaughter, Zoleka, has battled drug addiction, sexual abuse, the tragic loss of 2 children, and breast cancer. But she speaks triumph. Welcome to Profile. I'm Ian Boyne. Zoleka, welcome to Jamaica and to the studios of TVJ.
Thank you.
There was a night when you lit your room afire in an attempt to kill yourself. What led to that?
What led to that?
What happened before that?
I grew up, under quite harsh circumstances. I was abused from the young age of about 4 years old.
Abuse, sexual abuse or physical
Physically
abuse?
abused from the age of 4. Sexually abused from the age of 9. And I guess in some way of trying to self-soothe, I indulged in things that made me feel better about myself.
Like drugs?
Exactly. So that had a lot to do with my addiction.
And when did you start?
I had my first drink at the age of 9.
9.
And unfortunately, as traumatic as that incident was, it wasn't enough to steer me away from the path of addiction. Because by the age of 13, I was smoking ganja. That's when I started smoking ganja and experimenting with drugs. And I had become an alcoholic.
Yes. And you had gone on to cocaine also?
I had. So I had been abusing drugs for very long. Throughout my teenage years. However, it was only in 2001 where I then began my addiction with cocaine, which lasted for an entire decade.
10 years?
10 years.
Cocaine addiction. So you had reached a point on that night when you attempted to kill yourself. When, despite the comfort of the drugs.
Yeah.
In fact, you had reached a point where the drugs were not able to take away the pain or even to soothe the pain temporarily.
No, absolutely.
And you wanted to end it all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, and it was always an aim not to have to deal with the ghost of my childhood. So because I didn't want to have to deal with that, I needed something that would make me feel better about myself. So that's where, the sexual activity came in. Sex made me feel good about myself. Sex made you feel good. Exactly. Drugs made me feel good about myself. Alcohol made me feel good about myself. And so I engaged a lot in those activities.
So you're in and out of relationships?
Absolutely. In and out. I mean, I'm not proud of the mother that I was because I, subjected my children to quite a lot.
And you had your first child at 17?
17 years old. I had my first child. And, I had subjected my children to a lot. Bringing men into my home with my children.
The children there?
Drug dealers coming to drop off drugs with my children there. I have abused drugs. I've actually used drugs, with my children right next to me, although they were sleeping. But,
But when you thought of committing suicide, did you think of what that would do to the family name? Your grandfather is an iconic, revered figure around the world, still revered even in his death. Your grandmother, such a symbol of inspiration and dedication. But those realities were not enough to keep you from just ending it all.
No.
From attempting to end it all.
No. This is my life, and that is my reality, and the reality of so many families, communities, and the world at large, because, I always say to people, I often have a lot of people ask me, how did it feel, having gone through what you went through, being who you are,
Yes.
being a Mandela? And for me, I feel like, I think it's important for people to remember that I am a Mandela. So that does not mean I'm immune
True.
to sexual abuse. It does not
Yes.
mean that I am flawless. It does not mean that I am immune to addiction, sexual abuse. And I'm not immune to breast cancer, having been
Yes.
diagnosed with breast cancer
Yes.
twice now.
Yes. And a part of that tragedy is that about 10 days or so after you were fortunately rescued from killing yourself, taken to the hospital,
Yeah.
your daughter coming home from the opening ceremony of the World Cup in Johannesburg died in a car accident. So while you were there in hospital, you got that tragic news of the loss of your daughter.
Yeah.
When you thought that your problems were mounting, they had just increased.
Exactly.
How did you deal with that?
I mean, let's remember that, I had been indulging in drugs. And the reason I was hospitalized was due to a psychotic episode that was drug induced.
Yes.
And I then set my room alight with my children in the next bedroom.
Your children are in the next bedroom?
In the next bedroom. Unfortunately, I was living with my mother at the time, and it was my brother who actually came and, removed me from the bedroom and took care of me. And that was the last time I actually saw my daughter, because I was then hospitalized for an attempted suicide and depression that evening. And within about 10 days was when my aunt, my aunt, as well as my brother and my father, came to hospital to inform me that my daughter had been tragically killed. And this had happened 2 days after her 13th birthday.
2 days after the 13th birthday, which you weren't able to spend with her, certainly under normal circumstances. So the guilt, the pain, how were those few days after learning of that tragedy?
It should have been me.
You said that?
It should have been me. My children didn't deserve the mother that I was. And I didn't believe for a very long time that I deserved to be anywhere but in hell. Especially because of what I put not just my children through, but my family. And a lot of it was almost a blur to me. But I have to be quite honest and say that had it not been for my daughter's death, I would still be using drugs and alcohol.
Oh, that was a turning point. How did that jolt you? What realization dawned on you, Zoleka?
I had my son still to live for. And I knew that I was going to die, and if I'm going to be brutally honest, my fear was that there was no ways that I was going to end up in the same place where my daughter was had I taken my life.
I see, yes. But then later, you were to face the tragedy of the early death of your son.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you ever begin to think, why are all of these things happening to me? What is it about me? Can I ever come out of all of this?
I'm here.
Yes, yes.
I'm still alive.
Yes.
And, I always say to people that, we may not all be the same people, but our struggles make us the same. And I just feel like, maybe I'll never really quite understand why everything has happened the way it has in my life. But I'm just thankful that, for a very long time in my life, first of all, I never thought I would ever get to see the age of 30, and I am 37 years old today.
Yes,
and secondly, I never ever thought that I would amount to anything. And I never thought I actually had a voice. And I feel like I have a voice, and I'm I have a purpose in life, and it may have come at a cost, but I spend my life every day being a better mother because I know what that would have meant to my daughter.
Yes. Zoleka Mandela certainly has a voice and a purpose, and she's making those palpably felt on profile. We take our first break. Very good.